Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Carl Steinbeck here. Just wanted to jump on the Sunday afternoon, and out of respect for all the followers in the time zone where this is your evening, so in the Europe area, also in the South Africa region, we also have folks there following this case. It's probably a little bit late I know we got some folks even in Israel that follow this. So anyway, just wanted to cover this one issue. And also thanks for Food is Love, my mod, for this afternoon. Appreciate you. Um, Such a dedicated support. There's no notification even provided. If she can jump on, that's fine. If she can't, no pressure, but do appreciate you when you're on. Food is Love. Thank you much. Anyway, I think it's one of the things that doesn't sit well with me and my sense of justice and injustice on this case is how much truth is being kept out by the prosecution and rubber stamped by the judge. So those of you that follow this channel, you hear me talking about that pretty much every time I do a live stream about this case. And that's the number one way they're trying to get this jury to try to convict Karen Read, is to hide the truth and to try to get the jurors to basically just dislike Karen Read. And that's why they're peppering the trial with all these little short clips of Karen Read where much of what she said is taken out of context. You don't really get a flavor for the interview. So if you just get a quick snapshot of 5 seconds or 10 seconds, you don't really get a vibe or a feeling of what this person's personality is like. So it can be very, very misleading in that respect alone. So, but that's what this whole thing is. It's about misdirection, misleading, and confusing the jury. And yet, everything that you hear out of the prosecutor's mouth when he's arguing to the judge is about acting like he's trying to get the truth out and trying to be a straight shooter on thing, and it's the defense that's doing all the misdirecting and confusion. So anyway, so I thought when we look at this thing with the jury, like we saw in the last trial, they didn't know that these top-notch, world-class, best-in-the-class experts from ARCCA were denied from being asked who they were initially hired by on this case. It was the FBI/Department of Justice working with the U.S. Attorney's Office there in that locality. They had determined that they wanted to investigate this case, and they also were looking at, was there possible corruption, and was this part of another thing like they had in the Birchmore case, which is where a cop murdered some underage girl he was sleeping with when she became pregnant. He went to her apartment and murdered her. And so that guy is being tried by the feds right now because the feds didn't trust the Morrissey's office there. And so Morrissey's office has had this FBI presence and their scrutiny for a couple of years now. And so they're the ones that decided to, we need to take a look at what's really going on with this Karen Read case. Is she a scapegoat? Do they really have this forensic type evidence against her regarding her vehicle supposedly hitting John O'Keefe, which is what Morrissey and his state troopers and the Canton police are all making this out to be. So lo and behold, they spend, I'm hearing it's like $500,000 to hire ARCCA to investigate this and do their own forensic testing to see, is there any truth to this issue that the state's making out about Karen Read's vehicle doing the bodily damage to John O'Keefe that resulted in his death. So anyway, so that how they got involved in this case is relevant. I've never seen a case before where you don't have the ability to inquire of an expert how they originally came onto this case. And it's something that also how much they're paid for is very important. We didn't really hear it from this Aperture witness, Burgess, because he just claimed he didn't know how much Aperture was paying, charging the Commonwealth to have him as a witness there. I think it will come out again when this Welcher testifies. He's supposed to be their first witness out of the box, as I understand it, on Tuesday here, because we're closed Monday for a federal holiday. So Tuesday, the prosecution is going to bring out this Judson Welcher guy. Now, he does have a PhD in the kind of engineering like the ARCCA witnesses do, but the thing is, we're talking about totally different caliber type of companies that these two work for. The ARC, I should say, these two different types of classes of experts work for. You got the ARCA versus Aperture, and so I'm going to go over cover some of those differences. But before I do that, this whole thing, I think you need to understand how much to hide in the ball is going on by the prosecution. And let me point out this here. Keep in mind, Hank Brennan's arguing that telling the jury that the ARCA experts originally were contracted by the FBI is very much a dagger in the government's case. The government does not want this information coming out because it automatically gives them huge credibility on what kind of people hire them, what their clientele caliber is like, and how much they are trusted by the FBI to do neutral, unbiased work. Because what Hank wants to argue is that they're biased, they're prejudiced against the Commonwealth, they're just a bunch of hired snake oil salesmen. He's going to put all this kind of spin on it. And it's really laughable because that's anything of what these experts come across as. So he's going to make a fool out of himself, is my prediction. And so he doesn't want the truth that the FBI was involved in hiring them. And that is so important. And he tries to say that this is going to cause confusion for the jury and misleading the jury and that kind of stuff. So let's go look at the federal rules of evidence I have here. The federal rules are the model for all the states to follow. And so if you look across any of the United States, any of the rules of evidence they have for criminal and civil, they pretty much model after the federal rules. And so if you look at just a federal rule, pretty much you can see it's the same thing's going to be applying to the states. There may be some few nuanced differences, but the main guts of the rules are all the same. So what Brennan is citing is this rule 403. Let's see. Right here, this 403, it says the title of it is Excluding Relevant Evidence for Prejudice, Confusion, Waste of Time, and Other Reasons. It says the court may exclude relevant evidence, i.e. relevant evidence is who hired them, how they get onto this case. That's very, very much relevant. So you can sort of gauge, well, what brought you onto the case? What was your interest? Who hired you? What kind of payment have you received to date? I mean, those are routine kind of things. Those of you that saw the Johnny Depp trial, you saw that was brought out by the parties and it wasn't brought out on direct. So notice that Hank Brennan's not bringing up any of his expert fees on direct examination. I don't know why the defense isn't going into that in more detail, but I think it's really important to know, even like this Dr. Wolf they had on, the guy that came up from Friday, how much did he make? And he says only 1% of his income is from testifying. It's like, well, that 1%, really, he's not making hardly any money then to go fly out of his way. Is he making 10 million doing federal Medicare claims? So it just really gives I think a good flavor of how much the witness has on the line financially when they testify. So somebody like ARCA, that they just do this and they're not going to sacrifice their reputation just to get an extra client or get some name out there on TV or YouTube. So let's look at this rule here. The language of it here is the court may exclude relevant evidence if it's probative value. So probative, if it's probative, it means it's something that's going to shed light on issues at bar, something that's before the court that's has some material and basically is relevant to the case. So how somebody got hired on the case is relevant. How much they're getting paid, for example, is also relevant. And because you can try to show there's maybe a financial motive, and those are normal kind of things you can do to try to impeach an expert witness. But I would say somebody like ARCA, it's like if you try to go down that road as a prosecutor, you're going to have it just blow up in your face because they work for the highest level in the world, and I'm sure they charge a hefty fee for all their work, and they can stay in business that way because they're the best. And if you look at their website, they say they hire the best of the best in the industry for their respective fields. and you can tell the way they came across the last trial, and also in the joke of a voir dire hearing that where they had to fly into Boston and then drive on down to Denham to testify and be verbally abused by the prosecutor. So anyway, so substantially outweighed. So its probative value is substantially outweighed by a danger of one or more of the following: unfair prejudice, confusing the issues, misleading the jury, undue delay, wasting time, or needlessly presenting cumulative evidence. So what Hank Brennan was arguing is like this was confusing the issues and misleading the jury. So, but that's very relevant because how somebody got hired and how they got paid and all that kind of stuff is normal, routine stuff for experts. So for him to now say that you can't bring this up is really something that is going to actually mislead the jury because as we knew from the last trial, the first trial for Karen Reed, the jury was misled on how did they get involved in this case. And we heard that the jurors thought that these guys are hired by the insurance company of Karen Reed and they had a financial interest, i.e. they're thinking they must be trying to negate culpability of Karen Reed, and that's why they're siding with the insurance company, and they always are hired out by insurance companies to try to mitigate settlements they have to pay out or judgments they have to pay out, that kind of thing. So the jury's looking at them. That proves right there the jury is looking at what is their motive for getting involved in the case, how did they get hired, all those kind of details. And so for the prosecutor to keep that out, we know it's because this is really probative information. And if they're hired by the feds to do this, you know they're not a hired gun. So what Hank's going to try to argue is that they're basically just hired out and they have no loyalty to the truth, and they're basically just doing what they're paid to do. So whichever side hires them first, that's the side they're going to testify to. And so, there's no way anybody with a straight face can say that ARCCA was hired to do anything like that other than tell the truth like it is, look at this in a biased manner. And guess what? You're telling me, think about this, because you're telling me if ARCCA had came back and said that these ARCCA experts found that Karen Reed vehicle did in fact, it's everything aligns with Karen Reed's vehicle striking John O'Keefe and causing the death. Do you realize how much this information that Hank Brennan would try to bring out to the jury? He'd be parading that all over the courtroom. Hey, these are FBI guys. It's not even the corrupt, the defense trying to argue that the state guys are corrupt and it's framing, all that kind of stuff. These are the guys from the FBI. They have no correlation whatsoever with the state police and Trooper Paul and all their botched investigation. They did their own independent investigation, hired the best experts money could buy, and they also concluded that Karen Reed's vehicle is in alignment with striking John O'Keefe's body and causing the death thereby. So it just shows you how much it's really snake oil salesman on the part of the prosecution by trying to keep this out. And so this is like really, there's no way anybody that's been practicing law and doing trial work for any amount of time and understands how these things work and how much posing and posturing there is by someone like the prosecution in this case when they're trying to keep out this vastly critical detail. Because if you keep out the truth, the jury is going to be confused. So it's the exact opposite of what Hank Brennan's arguing. So keep in mind, if you take this whole sentence in context again, the court may exclude relevant. So is it relevant? Absolutely. How they got on this case. So it may exclude relevant evidence if its probative value is substantially outweighed by danger. So you're telling me, this is what Hank Brennan arguing to the court, is that so who they got hired by is substantially outweighed by a danger of confusing the issues and misleading the jury. Really, that's what this is about. The jury's gonna get confused as to why they were there, what they're supposed to do. There's nothing misleading or confusing about it. Every expert should, and how they got on a case should come out in any court of law. So, but this is not a normal court of law. This is a persecution, a targeted persecution of Karen Reed. The normal rules don't apply. And so I just wanted to show that to y'all, and you can see it for what it's worth. And then let's do a comparison on who we have. You guys can do this yourself, and you can see what I'm talking about here. So this is an overview of ARCCA, for example. ARCCA was founded in 1987, and they had a founding expert that started the company, and they've been around. They've had some growth over the years, but they've been around for many decades, and they are not bought by some equity investment firm to try to make money on doing accident reconstructions and forensic testimony. This is where really what they do. These are experts that own their own business, and they know that they're basically, they don't have to answer to investors. They're doing it because that's their passion, that's their expertise. And if you look at their website, so if you go to ARCCA.com, let me show that here now. They show their experts. And the thing that jumps out at you when you look at ARCCA is pretty much almost everybody has a PhD or a PE, meaning they're a licensed professional engineer, which is a super tough test. It's, in my opinion, tougher than any medical licensure as an MD or anything as a CPA or lawyer. I mean, this is like super tough. They got to be tested in all areas of engineering, not just their own specialty. So you really have to be an expert in knowledge and application of engineering principles across so many disciplines. So it may be structural engineer, mechanical engineer, biomedical engineer. It could be hydro engineer. I mean, there's so many different areas that that you could break off into, and that's the kind of test that these states have to have someone designated professional engineer. So let's just look at this guy, for example, PhD. Here's another guy, PhD. You sort of just jump around. Here's a guy, here's a PE, right? So he doesn't have the PhD, but look at all of his credentials there. Here's another guy. They do have some that have bachelors, but it's few and far between. Here's another guy, professional engineer. Like I say, PE is very hard to get. There's not many of them around compared to other types of degrees. Here's another guy. He's got both a PhD and a PE. So super highly calibered folks here. And they advertise they hire the best of the best in their respective areas. Here's another one, PhD, PE. So these are super genius type level people. And let's see here. So about us, our company. Here's what I was saying here. Founded by crash expert engineer Alan Cantor. And they right away started out doing work for NASA, McDonnell Douglas, and the U.S. Navy. So they have these type of high caliber clientele. Look at that. They worked on the U.S. space shuttle missions, and also like the Challenger crash that happened that broke up over Texas and Louisiana a number of years ago. They worked on that as well. So NASA hires them. We have, those of you may remember the TWA Flight 800 that broke up after leaving. I think it was either New York City or Newark Airport, and it blew up in a 747 shortly after takeoff. And that was something they worked on. So these guys are like they say, the best of the best. So let's compare that now. Oh, they also do professional sports leagues, and any corporation, if money's not an object, they need the best of the best. This is who they hire. Okay, law firms, government agencies. And that's why the FBI hired them. They've been hired by the FBI and the NTSB, National Traffic Safety board, and also the for the flight TW800 is the FBI and the NTSB, I believe it was the one that do the investigations for all aviation accidents. So that's the caliber we're talking about. And so with that, let's go and do that comparison now with Aperture. Aperture, they started out originally as an engineering consulting firm, but then they pretty much were bought out by an equity investment group. And look at all the mergers and joint ventures and stuff like that they're doing, new offices, announcing new partnership. They are rebranded. The Trinity Hunt brothers or Trinity Hunt partners bought them out. And so I'm going to get into that here a little bit. Here they rebranded as Aperture in 2022, merging with somebody else. So this is like really an investment type business. Yeah, Wexco was the original one here. This company is the one that the Trinity Hunt partners bought out. And they've just been buying and growing ever since then. So they also had, let's go back to, there's one other article I want to show you. Get rid of this, going to ads. This one here, this came out just in January. Look how much buying and selling there's going on. Here it says that Dallas-based PE firm Trinity Hunt Partners has sold its majority stake in the Arlington-based Aperture, a forensic expert witness services firm, to a San Francisco, California-based Genstar Capital. So these are all equity owners that own this company. Here's the CEO of Aperture right now, Robert Joyce. Deals of the terms of the deal is not disclosed. So they've grown a lot. Now they have more than 11,000 cases annually across this client base of $2,500 customers. But what I haven't found on their website is who their clientele are. So let's go back to their expert page. And if you scroll through here, this guy doesn't have a CV. He's got a Bachelor of Science in mechanical engineering. Here's this more senior guy. He's a CPA, but he doesn't have his degrees there listed. So I assume he at least has a bachelor's. Let's go to somebody that's easier to find what they advertise. Okay, this guy attended Texas Tech, got a bachelor's in mechanical engineering, has certification, is working towards his PE license. Okay, working towards. I wonder if he's got. I assume he's got more progress than this guy here. So let's look back at Shannon Burgess. They don't mention UAB anymore. University of Alabama Birmingham, his made up bachelorate degree he's working on. Keep in mind he hasn't taken any courses since 2019. So, and notice his LinkedIn profile are gone, as well as his CV. So they're in a crisis mode here. I mean, this is a huge hit on them. Some of these professional certifications I heard are removed as well. Some of those were not accurate. I think he had more than one membership listed. So anyway, not that you need education to be super smart on something involving the tech field, but when you misrepresented your credentials like that in a court and somebody's facing life, a life sentence, and that's the kind of seriousness you have for your CV, unbelievable. Here's another guy, Bachelor of Science with a minor in mathematics. Okay. You're not, we haven't seen a PhD yet. I'm just jumping around here. Bachelor of Science, currently working towards something. Okay, so he's just got one bachelor's. Here's an accident reconstruction guy, Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering. Are you guys catching the flavor here? I mean, there's a big difference in the educational level, junior college. He doesn't have a bachelor's, or does he? No, he's got a junior college. Well, it doesn't even say he graduated. I see. Hmm. This guy, he's an executive vice president. So this is basically the same kind of background as Welcher, and yet he's only got a bachelor of science engineering. That's interesting. So this guy would never be hired. For example, he'd never be hired at ARCCA. This guy, human factors, this is more of a, I think that's more of a psychology background. Here's a guy, accident reconstruction, bachelor of science, mechanical engineering. Again, so most of these guys are like bachelor. That's the average that you see here. So you're telling me a guy like Burgess would be able to be hired by ARCA? No way. Yeah, so the nowhere on their website did I find, I guess I can put that back up. So we saw who ARCA has as their clientele. Let me go back up to be fair in covering this. One second here. Somehow X'd out that tab, so I got to research it again here on Google. Here we go. Okay, I'm on their main webpage here. About, so if we go to about, operational philosophy, amplify, we seek excellence together, accuracy we prove with precision, truth we operate with integrity, uncompromised. So Burgess didn't meet that standard. We're at the forefront of forensics and expert analysis. Well, not if you got bogus bachelor's degrees on your resume / CV. Let's assume everybody else does not have that problem that Burgess had. So this sort of is an indicator here on how they had mergers. Here's their leadership. Far right there, we see Robert Joyce, President, CEO. Service line partners. I know that Welcher is a vice president. Here we go. That's him right here. Bottom right, Judson Welcher. So we talk about the reach. But who's their clientele? Look, they talk about we use proven science and acceptable industry standards to shine a light on the truth. But that doesn't apply to Burgess's resume. Services. Accident reconstruction. That's what we got here. They talk about what kind of work they do, their capabilities. But and they talk about their different folks that cover that area. But insights, yeah, that's just more their mergers and acquisitions, some of their testimony provided on half. I'm sure they wanted to advertise how they testified on behalf of this case when it's all said and done. But now with Burgess's collapse, I'm sure that's not going to be the case. So here in 2023, they opened their Aperture Research and Testing Facility. It provides a space for collaboration with Aperture and other industry experts to continue to shine a light on the truth. So they're really focused on truth, and yet how'd they let Burgess sit on not pursuing a bachelor's degree since 2019 and yet put that on his resume that he's actually graduated? And the thing I wish the defense would have brought out on cross-examination of Burgess is, what did you talk to the prosecutor about your resume details, and why did you suddenly change it and update it to say pursuing completion or whatever those words were? So I think the only reason that he updated his resume was because Hank would have done those kind of detailed questions of it. And I think Hank was hoping the defense wouldn't come across the fact that he's backtracking off of his bachelor's degree. So anyway, with that, I'll go ahead and go Q&As now. So if you guys have any questions, go ahead and put in a red emoji if you can, so I can distinguish questions from chat, internal chat. J.I. are saying Burgess and I am getting an interview with ARCCA for a chance. He definitely would have to say he got a bachelor's, which he did not have. Yeah, I mean, I found one person with a bachelor's or something in a minor role, nothing like the kind of work that he does. Yeah, Russian Aloha. It's not believable he's still trying to get his BS for 17 years. There's no motivation because he was never challenged on it before. So let's see here. All right, South Africa. Okay, I thought there might be a South African watcher at this time. I don't know what the time zone difference is right now. Yeah, objection sustained. I mean, this is objection sustained trial for the truth coming out. Yeah, Queen Olive, Ruth Ann, you just think the Commonwealth should have used ARCCA too. They were sent all the info by the FBI and chose to ignore and hire the ones that life for them. That's exactly what they're doing. They like, we got to find somebody to counteract, be a counterweight to ARCCA. We don't trust them. They were hired by the FBI, so we can't trust them. Well, why didn't you? All the questions you wanted to have answered by ARCCA, why didn't you? By Aperture, why didn't you send those same questions to ARCCA? You didn't like the answers ARCCA gave you because they killed your case. And so you had to go forum shop for the right firm that would support you. So how much are you paying them? Commonwealth. How much are you paying Aperture to testify for these two witnesses? Harley Pete, straight up corruption. Absolutely. ARCCA is my kryptonite. Isn't accident reconstruction as accurate as the data given to them? What data did Aperture use? I mean, how's this what guy Welcher going to explain exactly what happened to John O'Keefe to support the government's theory that it was struck by a vehicle when they don't even know where Karen's vehicle was at in location and in reference to 34 Fairview and on Fairview, or was it 32 Fairview? They don't have any detailed knowledge of that. Then you have no recording of where John O'Keefe's body was found. It's just a general area. All those kind of things are really huge and important on accident reconstruction if you're going to try to say exactly how it happened. Now, for example, ARCA, they don't need to know exactly how John O'Keefe's body was contorted to wind up killing him and what he got hit by. All they have to do is look at it from the standpoint is, was it Karen Reed's car or not? So the burden of proof is on the prosecution. Yeah, I just don't trust Hyde at all. I don't trust Burgess at all. I just don't trust experts when they're basically working for an equity investors as much as I do if they have their own business and they've been around for many decades as a stable business. Also, like Hyde, if you're your own business owner, then I think you have more of a financial incentive to help the person that's reaching out to you. It could be even an unintentional bias. You're trying to help the person that's hiring you to do their research. Them bones, shouldn't they? What they're paying Aperture be public record? Eventually, will be public record, just not yet. The government wants to keep that under wraps. River Birch, why didn't they get DNA from Colin and Brian to see if they're a match? Both Brian's, see if they're a match on the DNA found on John O'Keefe's clothes shoes, because they don't want to know the truth. That's why. Elizabeth Fuller, do I think there will be a good chance there will be federal charges brought if Karen is found innocent? I'm not sure about that. The feds have to have a lot of ducks in a row, a lot of evidence build up to prove any kind of public corruption type case. And even then they may not pursue it. So I'm not gonna say that they're definitely going to bring charges. I'm just saying that I think they have a continual open file on all the corruption going on in that part of the state. Kathleen Lycos, knowing what I know now about Aperture, would you trust them to use in your defense work? I would say, if it all comes down to money, if you can't hire the best of the best, like ARCA, and you have to go with our Aperture, but now think of the Aperture name with Burgess. If I had to use an Aperture witness, they could bring up the fact that what happened with Burgess on the stand, and so I would not use them. No, I would not use them. Not at all. Even though, let's say every other single expert they have doesn't have this big big problem that Burgess has, I still wouldn't use them because it's like guilt by association, and you'll want to open the door to your expert being attacked for working with a firm that lets somebody skate on hiding a lack of a bachelor's for so many years and no significant progress or intentional progress to completion. I mean, just count all the lies that were told in that testimony from Burgess. Quite a few of them. Richie Blackmore from the UK. Hello. What would happen accidentally on purpose to let it slip that ARCA worked for the feds in front of a jury. Well, as a lawyer, you're not allowed to try to circumvent the judge's ruling like that. If a witness blurts something out like that on their own, then they could do that. But as a lawyer, you cannot tell a witness how to circumvent and blurt something out. That'd be unethical. But if the witness on their own does that, then that's a different story. The lawyer would not be in trouble for that. Schnickums, isn't it prejudicial to not give the truth regarding how ARCA was involved? I think so, absolutely. It actually confuses the issue to not say that ARCA was hired by the feds. Absolutely confuses it, because that's what the jury was in the first trial, was scrambling to figure out, who are these guys? Like, why don't we know? They're saying another agency hired them. An agency should be a dead giveaway that it's probably a government agency, and if it's not the state of Massachusetts, maybe it's the feds. But they thought it was the agency that was code word for insurance company. So the judge already knows that was confusing the jury, but confusing to the jury on who ARC worked for helped the prosecution, and that's why she kept it out. Joe Running, you're saying hello in the UK there. You're checking out Welcher's CV, and it has a not for expert designation written across in big letters. I don't think it was there before. What do you think? I don't know if this came out right before or after Burgess testified, but why would you put that across as a watermark across your CV? Yeah, I've seen that before. I had that up the other day when we were covering this. So I think it's very suspicious. And what, you don't want to stand behind your resume? Shannon McCarthy, I agree with you that you're saying the fact that Hank never asked Shannon what his education was is a big indicator that Hank knew. Now, keep in mind, their other expert, that's Ian Whiffen, does not have any kind of bachelor's or master's either. And so, therefore, you wouldn't ask it. But if the guy is representing he has one and then he hasn't, for him not to disclose the fact that he had a bogus resume out there and he's cleaning it up, it's he set himself up as somebody that cannot be trusted to present the truth to the jury. Beach Bum, what's happening now with Burgess and Brennan meeting and planning? Well, I think Brennan doesn't want to use Burgess anymore. He's not going to use him for anything in rebuttal. He's damaged goods. How much will the defense get out of that on the stand regarding Burgess? I think they should get a lot out of it, because all of his technical testimony and what things he was testifying to, I think there's just a big mushroom cloud over his head where you can't believe him. So, and a lot of the stuff anyway, I'm telling you, I don't trust electronic stuff for pinpoint accuracy, whether it's a phone or an app or a car data. I think there's so many things that are wrong on those kind of details. To help maybe set somebody up for exculpatory type evidence, I think, like when somebody connects to a Wi-Fi, I think that's way more credible. There's not so much of like pinpoint location type accuracy involved. So, hey, food is love. 3 witnesses I would call are the first 2 ARCA witnesses, and I'd probably get into somebody that's going to humanize the case more and really bring out some good stuff. And it's not going to be confrontational. I'd bring out the snowplow driver, Lucky, and then I'd also bring out the guy that actually hauled away and towed Karen's vehicle up on the on top of that flatbed truck. See, Star Wire, this is also determined to hide the real facts because they know they can't get a conviction otherwise. And so there's so many suspicious things, so many reasonable doubts, so many actions of other people than Karen that look like they're trying to cover something up. It's just there. It's just hit you square in the head. with a 2x4 essentially. Serenity, I agree. ARCCA will blow Aperture out of the water. Colin, 6-hitter, can Aperture pull Welcher based on unreliable evidence from Burgess? No, they're not going to pull Welcher because they're making most of the money off of Welcher, not Burgess from the Commonwealth. So, I mean, I think Welcher is not looking forward to testifying at all. If I was in his shoes after following Burgess, my gosh, that'd be a lot of angst to be associated with a guy like Burgess. Mandy, Aperture's a low budget ARCA. Gee, I do think that Brennan vetted his CV, but he's willing to go with it and roll the dice, hoping that defense wouldn't catch on that he'd been running those bogus CVs for so many years. Huntington on third. Do I notice that most other Aperture employees hid their names and details on LinkedIn? I didn't. Well, I guess they did not have a lot of links for CVs and LinkedIn. That's true. Oh, 06 Yukon Denali. Dog bites turn into high impact plastic cuts. That is what the prosecution's trying to make out. Those are not dog bites. CGC, after Karen Reed is acquitted, do you think they will or should still protest for justice for John O'Keefe and a real investigation reform? I think there should be. I'm banking on acquittal, but I cannot guarantee that because I'm not familiar with the young jury like this. Is it if it was a normal jury and there wasn't any issue of really young folks on the jury, then I would tell you, yeah, there's no way they're gonna not get an acquittal. So because there's young jury and that's very unusual to have a young jury across the board, I'm not going to say with that kind of certainty that I normally would. So the worst case scenario I think would be a hung jury. There's no way she would get convicted of second-degree murder. It's just way overcharged, and you lose credibility as a prosecutor when you're trying to go to the extreme like that. Yeah, Burgess was the latest of Brennan's errors in this case. He was reckless. He was reckless to call this guy. He knows that Aperture isn't going to hold a candle to what ARCCA is for qualifications and experience and credibility, but he's got to throw mud against the wall. Beach Bum, in regards to Hank and Welcher meeting this weekend, I'll let you know how much will defense get out on the stand in relation to Burgess' prior testimony. Yeah, I'm sure he's going to be coached on how to try to avoid Burgess, and he doesn't have any connection with him or supervisory responsibility for him or things of that nature. It has to be humiliating being associated with what Burgess did, like I say. D, a former Army doctor here. Thanks for your service. You grew up in Mass. That's always been known as a corrupt state. This case blows your mind. Okay, you're a doctor there, then, D. I guess you also agree that these injuries are not consistent with a vehicle strike. Colleen, you're saying they can call Colin, he just cannot be a third party culprit. Yeah, I don't know if they're going to call him or not now because they got such damaging goods against Higgins, but that remains to be seen. I'm not worried about third party culprit instruction for the defense. They have enough right now. They don't need to worry about instruction and try to point the finger to who actually was involved. Let the jury think of that on their own. Edward Scott, you're saying right for the first trial, Judge relented, let the defense subpoena Jen McCabe's Google search records right from Google. Only the defense has a Google search rep on their witness list. That's true. They can't handle the truth. Ryan B., wouldn't it make sense for the defense to bring the jurors on a trip that recreates the crash to demonstrate it's impossible for a vehicle's taillight to shatter after hitting a human-like object? I think the judge is not going to allow that because where would you go to set that up? There's too many issues you cannot recreate. You cannot recreate a real human arm, a live human's arm like that to be hit. So I think it's fine enough to allow experts to testify to that. Now, they could also have videotapes of their demonstrations being done, so I don't know if ARCCA is going to do that. Special Bendy Brothers, I think the jury should be told the truth. It's not fair the judge is hiding things from the jury. Yeah, you guys can't believe how much truth is hidden on different trials. And it's really disturbing when I see prosecutors trying to hide the truth to get a conviction. There's nothing more disgusting than that to see in a trial. Constant Landers, you feel the judge is questioning jurors individually. She's set to dismiss certain ones. You don't trust her. I don't trust that process either, how they kick off the alternates. Sherman Lilly, how is it that John was originally found in his stomach? If the brain surgeon said he fell on his back and hit his head, he turned himself over, apparently. No, I think it's just Jen McCabe is the only one that said he was initially on his stomach and they had to flip him over. So maybe she was talking about a couple hours prior. I hope the defense brings that up more in this case when they're doing their case in chief. Chris, you asked in your opinion, what are the three most important topics you would drive home to the jury if you were the defense? I mean, there's so many things drive home. I would say reasonable doubt is the most important theme to cover in your argument. And I think weaving in reasonable doubt and also telling a story. I would not just go through just the witnesses and how the prosecution witnesses are impeached and they can't be trusted and credible. But I think they need to tell a story. I think the best advocates are those that tell stories. And so they need to tell the story of what happened from the perspective of the defense. And we never heard a story, for example, out of out of Brennan how it happened. We haven't even heard the exact body contortions of how John O'Keefe landed on the ground. We've had the prosecution's evidence say two different things. Was he found on his back, or was he found on his stomach? So they even have a conflict on that. So, and then the way to drive home the reasonable doubts are to have all the litany of things that the government has not answered or created doubt. The government has actually created reasonable doubt through every single witness, practically. So, and I think the thing is, if it can't be explained away on how John O'Keefe got injured, you just can't. The jury's got to be clear that it's not. Well, Karen is the last one that saw him, so it must be her responsibility. They got to dispel that notion hard and fast. The jury is not supposed to solve it. If they cannot figure out how it happened, they don't say, "Well, I guess the prosecution's theory makes the most sense because we don't know exactly how John O'Keefe was struck." That's not how it works. The burden of proof is on the prosecution. So you need to hit home burden of proof, reasonable doubt, and go through the storytelling of how this scene unfolded. Because I think if you do that and play the 911 tape, I think is a huge reasonable doubt indicator as well. With Jen McCabe just not sounding serious about this being a guy dead or dying, somebody she loves, and all the rest of the crazy behavior of all the other people in the house flows from there. You're all set. Given the experts are sequestered, how much prep can Hank do with Welcher with regards to Burgess? He can. The sequestering has to do with watching other testimony. It doesn't prevent the attorneys from discussing what's happened in the trial with the particular witness or expert. Pretty eyes, you're saying the one thing you'll say about Lally is he put it out there rather than hide the bad facts like Brennan. Well, he's not as blatantly bad as Brennan, but when you look at all the objections he made, those were nonstop. So if it was truth revealing type questions, he would object. He definitely would object too. So I don't agree with that. Lynn Down, and why would I think Burgess is the only fraud amateur? Well, I think I don't think there's that many people like him out there. That's why, and I'm not going to presume guilt because of one that all the rest are bad. I mean, you can look at any profession, look at any hospital, the doctors there. You could have 97% are terrific doctors, and 3 of them shouldn't be practicing medicine. You same thing about lawyers or any profession, licensed profession. Look at judges. You could have 99% fair-minded, super smart judges that are excellent to have on your case, no matter which side you're on, and then you can have 1%. They're just absolutely terrible and should never have been wearing the robe to begin with. City Girl, Countrified. Well, I sort of already talked about that. So ARCCA, there are no grounds. There's no confusion of issues. It's not misleading the jury. It is misleading the jury and confusing issues if you don't say that they were hired by the FBI. So Brendan's actually doing the complete opposite of the truth, and he knows that. He knows that. He just knows it's if you say that they're hired by the FBI, it pretty much they can just sit back and say, ARCA, we don't need, We believe you. Nothing else matters what anybody else says. We believe you. Game over. Missile Mensch says a jury reviewed transcripts of the trial. Most states and federal courts, you can ask to have a transcript portion read back if you're wanting to focus on a particular witness's testimony. But I understand that in Massachusetts, they're not allowed to do that. Northern cancellation. It's clear Jackson's having a bit of fun with Trooper Proctor. I'm sorry, former Trooper Proctor. Yeah. I wonder if the judge prevents them. I guarantee you Hank had a motion in there to prevent them from calling Proctor fired Trooper Proctor. We just don't know about it because there's so many sidebars that shows even more. If we once are able to see what happens to those sidebars, because that's revealed after trial, you'll see how really bad it was. It's much worse than what we're seeing, the favoritism by the judge. Bisky, yeah, he should probably ask that right out front, but that's probably suppressed as well. Brendan wants them to think they're working for an insurance company. Yeah, ARCCA, that's can the question ARCCA be you were hired by another law enforcement agency? No, that's what the judge is keeping out. That's what she's keeping out. So that's not, that should be allowed, but it's not. Aunt Nancy, is it normal for appellate attorneys to be sitting in the courtroom every day? I don't know what appellate attorneys you're talking about, but if they're Commonwealth attorneys, I would say, yeah, that's very unusual. Meanwhile, Gio, can the defense say they work for another law agency like they did for McCabe? I think the judge is keeping that out as well. But yeah, but Jen McCabe can blurt it out. I hope somebody blurts it out. Or maybe they'll see billboards around sign or something, or flyers talking about how ARCA is hired by the feds. I can't believe the locals they're protesting on will just sit back and not do something. Try to get the message out. I'm suspecting that anyway. Suzanne, can the defense call Trooper Paul to report his own findings, then play him off the prosecution's new explanation to show the prosecution is inconsistent, looking for any story that fits? Yeah, that's something I brought up on when I was on the Young Jerks with Mark Betterow, that I thought, that I'd be tempted to call Trooper Paul to show that the prosecution's theory is constantly changing. And Leslie and I were actually talking about this morning as well. So I would be very tempted to call Trooper Paul, because this is the only way you're going to get in the evolving lies and misdeception and misdirection by the prosecution is called Trooper Paul, and bring out what he testified to in the previous hearing about how this happened. And then the prosecution has to solve his squirrely testimony alongside Burgess's and Welcher's. So you're going to have Trooper Paul making this thing look like the government can't get their story straight. And now they're going to hire Welcher. You're supposed to be Welcher. No, sorry, we're going to go with ARCCA. I hope so too, Sandy. I really trust that the jury's not that has that low of common sense and intelligence that they can't see it for what it is. And that's why I think that Hank Brennan is really miscalculated on what it takes to win on a case like this. He's really, if you lose your credibility on a case and you're doing so many stuff, so many things that the jury can pick up on that you're not a trusted agent of truth, then how are you expecting to win a case? Liz M, please keep your money and give it to Henry Defense. But thank you. You're saying, did the neurosurgeon testify that his type of head injury should have produced a lot of blood? Was it an open head wound? There was no discussion of that whatsoever. It's not come out through any of the testimony that I recall at all, and I've been waiting to hear that. Is where's all that 3 liters of blood? Jennifer Rank, the defense needs to bring up that the elbow is on a hinge and the shoulder is on a ball and socket joint. No way for the injury to occur as they claim to these 2 facts alone, among other things. Yeah, so if your elbow's on the hinge, your shoulder's on a ball and socket, how would you not have broken bones, massive bruisings, and not these little bite claw type marks all up and down your arm? Hmm. Shell 483. Hello to you in Australia. Wow, what I think you're like depending where you're at. If you're in Sydney, I think you're 15 hours ahead of us. But it's not just one cat. We have 3 cats. They're all doing good. Thank you. Oh, to Bob, any idea how much ARCA research costs American taxpayer? Well, it was. I heard it's around 500,000. I think it'd be easily that. And then anything after they got done serving out their contract requirements with the feds, then they would have been billing the defense for that. Jesse Reynolds, Absher may be best served by not returning a trial and issuing a candid general PR statement on their website. I think that would, if I was their general counsel, I would tell them, do not cooperate with Hank Brennan anymore. You're bringing us down. Mosaic Mind, can Karen Reed's lawyer say ARCA was hired by a federal agency rather than just an agency? Probably not. That's too revealing of the truth. Russian Aloha, you're saying every witness that takes a stand has added and changed their testimony. I think after the defense puts on their case, she will be acquitted. Yeah, I think as far as those different fact witnesses, not the lab type folks, but that is true. Everybody's added to and changed their testimony, trying to embellish it. That does seem like a common theme. And Hank Brennan just runs with it. He likes to have everybody embellish their testimony because he thinks it's helping him, but it's really not. It just makes his witnesses look more unreliable. Colin, six hitter. If Aperture advertises experts, and they have duty of care to verify credentials. That is true. Welcher is a CEO. He's not a CEO. He's a vice president of some division. And they should ask him about Burgess, why he slipped by. Yeah, they should. Joe Running, Burgess was allowed to say he worked for police agencies, including Interpol. Brennan asked him in court if he testified in federal cases. I mean, ARCCA can now say what they do. They should be able to. They just can't say about how they became involved in this case, working for the feds, which is a major injustice. But I think they should renew it. If I was them, I'd renew it. If this is a case of mine in Texas, I'd keep pounding away, asking for that, filing more motions to reconsider. Lily Rose, the first jury had thought they had to solve the crime. They didn't understand reasonable doubt at all. Yeah, that's why you got to hit on reasonable doubt and the jury instructions. Keep in mind, the jury instructions are not touched on at all because they only had an hour, which is absolutely ridiculous to have an hour after weeks and weeks of trial. You only have an hour to summarize your argument. That's basically forcing you to commit malpractice. Juicing recipes. What's your biggest surprise of this case so far? Well, I think it's the biggest outrage I have, which is the injustice of this whole setup with hiring Brennan and having a judge like you do. This tag team of Brennan and Judge Canoni is really just shocking to see this happening over and over and over again, where they're hiding the truth. I mean, I expected it once I saw that they hired Brennan and he was a defense attorney working for mob clients. But to see it unfold day after day after day, I mean, there's so many surprises, though. I mean, the way the ARCA witnesses were forced to come and testify in a for dire hearing that was really nothing other than to punish them and to try to find out how much the feds are like on to the Commonwealth. I mean, I could just go on and on the most bizarre things you would never think would happen in a murder trial are happening here. Yukon Denali, you're saying the car is covered with walls. So road salt and the taillight is completely free of salt and water. Yeah, they all look very clean. Even the tennis shoes that looked that they presented as John O'Keefe's shoes look very clean. Suzanne, you're asking why was Allie McCabe at the Canton High School between 12:30 and 1:30. Yeah, it could be something to do with the dog. Maybe meeting up with Colin. Did Colin? I heard there's theories that Colin could have gone on the railroad tracks with the dog to meet up with her later. There's any number of things that could happen, but it's not the defense's job to prove any of that. It's just they're just there, and they only have to help throw doubts of what the prosecution's saying happened. Okay, Russian Aloha, you're saying Garrett Wing, the American Standard Canine guy, will win this case for Karen 100%. He's going to be the number one witness in this whole trial for me. I hope he's good. I don't think he's the best witness, but I think it's a key. It's a key one if he's allowed to testify as to what he wants to be able to relate to his experience and what his professional opinion is on those dog bites. But I think there's still going to be some litigation and Brennan trying to keep that stuff out. So Rose Harvey, you're saying you thought Welcher was resting on Burgess' work, and that's why he had to go on the stand after him. No, it's more like they just have different areas of expertise, and they wanted to bring up the location of things before they bring up the actual biomechanical stuff. Cute by half. You're saying as if there's a hung jury again, how many times can they retry the case? Is there a limit? I would say maybe they'd go 3 or 4 times. I've never heard of anybody being prosecuted more than that. Nobody's stupid enough to try somebody that more than 3, 4 times. A former boss of mine got prosecuted 3 times, had a mistrial every time because they had a hung jury. He got in trouble for something in California and got prosecuted by the feds. So that was interesting. Then he finally cut a deal with him and pled his time served. He was not out on bond at all. He was in pretrial confinement in a jail and wound up pleading to time served. That was a boss of mine in the army I'm talking about back over 30 years ago. Jojo Mojo, you're saying what are the limitations for defense when questioning hostile witnesses like Proctor? Well, if they call him as their own witness and he's not giving answers and he's stonewalling them, then they could ask the court for permission to treat him as a hostile witness, and they could go into more cross-examination style, because normally on direct, you're not supposed to lead the witness, although Brennan does that over and over again, especially on redirect. He's getting away with a lot on that. But anyway, he also looks really bad the way he gets angry at folks, just like the way he did to the medical examiner. He just really embarrassed himself on that one. So in that case, sort of his angry personality came out. So I thought that was a good thing. Actually helped defense not objecting to him leading. Cassidy Hutchinson, who can testify about the lack of blood evidence, and that should have been presented per John O'Keefe's injury, and then will the defense highlight this? I would think so. I hope so, but not sure. Yeah, Edward Scott, you're saying according to ME in their first report, John lost like 3.5 to 4 liters of blood, more than half. No idea why the defense didn't bring that up to trial either. Don't know. Was some of that internal bleeding, so not all of it would have leaked out on the ground necessarily? Yes, Suzanne, I agree with you. Defense should find a contractor who renovated the basement at 34 Fairview. Gen X girl lawyer. I assume you're a lawyer. You're saying you're so disgusted with judge misapplication of rules of evidence on unequal set of rules for each side. Yeah, it's you won't find a more biased judge than this. It is really disgusting. Special Benny Brothers. I haven't seen or heard of any evidence that John O'Keefe was hit by a vehicle. That is true. Birch. Cops driving drunk tells you how untrustworthy they are. Yep. Vicky, I agree. How was his phone underneath him? Yeah, keep in mind, Trooper Paul said he was launched 30 feet, doing helicopter spins and landed, and then his phone is right underneath him. Yeah, right. You could tell Trooper Paul didn't even believe what he's saying. So now we'll find some new way that prosecution is going to come up with what happened to him through the use of Welcher, because we haven't heard it as of yet. Esmeralda, you're saying who should do the closing? I think that because the defense is so much relying on a lot of technical information to counter the prosecution, I think Alessi should be doing the closing, even though Hank Brennan is going to be the prosecutor, and he's going to be a lot tougher to deal with than Lally. He's going to be putting a lot of spin on stuff. I think credibility is the number one thing you need as a trial lawyer, especially if you're on a criminal case and you got your client's life on the line. I think you have any three of them could be effective in doing defense argument, but I'm thinking who is the absolute best they could use and why would you use that? So I think you have Alan Jackson. He can talk faster than Alessi, but I think if you got just an hour to argue, and I'd be arguing for at least 2 hours on this if I was on this case here in Texas. But I think somebody like Jackson, he's going to have to talk a lot of technical stuff because think about it, all the really nitty gritty details or where they're trying to place Karen, all that is those witnesses were cross-examined by Alessi, and Alessi has done a great job bringing all them down. So I think it makes most sense on all that technical stuff for Alessi then to nail it home on the closing because the jury believes him. So now we hear all this technical information being discredited by Alessi, and then to hear Jackson talking about all this technical digital stuff for the first time, I think is just too disjointed. So I think the theme and consistency and the fact that Alessi is such a likable attorney and such a super smart attorney, and he comes across as just like an average kind of guy. He's not flashy. He's not dressed flashy. He's not wearing the handkerchiefs in his shirts, and he's not dressed with fancy collars and stuff like Jackson is. So I think what I look for is connectivity to the jurors, who's the most relatable, and I think Yannetti has that as well. I think people trust him as well, and I think you just get more mileage out of Alessi, and it makes most sense. And I don't think they ever intended to be that way, but the way it's coming out right now is that he's like sort of the sledgehammer for the defense. And so if he's your sledgehammer on cross-examination, I would say bring the sledgehammer in for the closing and just crush all this spin that Hank Brennan's going to do. And keep in mind, here in Massachusetts, it's not like in every other court I've ever seen in America where you have the prosecution argue first, then the defense, and then you have a prosecution rebuttal. Here, the defense goes first, and then the prosecutor goes. So the defense doesn't get to argue a second time, and you don't know what you're rebutting of the prosecution if you go first. You just have to take your best knowledge of the facts and details case and expect what the prosecutor is going to argue and then counter it in your argument. So it's very, very much another strange thing of injustice going on up there. Triple S, you saying you think the attorneys will decide who does the closing based on how the jurors seem to react to each one of them? I mean, I think Jackson is like even though they say there's not a lead attorney, I think Jackson sort of thinks of himself as a lead. And so it's going to be hard to him to give that up to Alessi. So you could have some infighting that way, and it may come down to who Karen wants to do the closing. So hopefully it's not an ego thing. I think if you look at it from a non-ego standpoint and they talk it over, I think I think the wisest decision would be to have Alessi do it. And I've been saying that for a long time now. Stevie, how okay, sequestering means they're not supposed to watch what the other people are testifying to, but as an attorney, it's not off limits for me as a prosecutor to say, "Hey, Welch, Dr. Welcher, guess what happened? You know, Burgess, blah blah blah." Um, and so I could say, "What do you know about Burgess and his bogus resume, his bogus CV, what have you?" And this came out, it's really bad. And you can rehash what happened and say, like, "What do you know about it? This is going to come up. Defense is going to ask you this." And so, what was your involvement and knowledge of him doing this? Why didn't you catch it? Who's his supervisor? Why didn't they catch it? He's throwing other staff members under the bus. Is that true that, defense is going to ask, is that true that other staff, support staff are the ones that work on the resumes for your experts? I mean, that just sounds so jacked up. It sounds like he wanted top cover. I don't believe he would support any of that. So I don't know how he's going to do damage control with any credible straight face. MB Brennan, you're saying in the first trial, Jen McCabe's daughter Allie said John was in the house when Colin was. Does this mean that John was definitely in the house? I mean, it can be interpreted that way. It definitely could be interpreted that way. I don't know if she meant it that way, but it does. That's one interpretation you could have of that. Edward Scott, you said Lally hit as much as Brennan in a mumbling, rambling kind of way that distracted people from what he was doing. Well, keep in mind, he's taking orders also from Morrissey. So Morrissey was the master of disaster, telling him what to do. AJK. Yep. If she pleads out, it'll be in the end. If she fights, it'll be an episode. Yep. And this is the episode. They better hit that in their closing. The defense should. Sharon McCarthy. Jen McCabe also said, and I don't want to call it John got out of the car. So that mean that she was the last one to see him alive. You could argue that. Gen X girl lawyer. The jury's not responsible for solving this, and if they don't know for sure, then the Commonwealth failed in its burden. Yeah, that's what they need to hit home. That's a major point because if whoever's doing the closing for the defense, if they don't drive that point home, then and they have the same jury confusion as the first one, then yeah, there could be a mistrial or even a conviction on something. JI bits and bytes. Come on, Burgess. Welcher dying inside. The Commonwealth's so desperate to hide the truth, and it only makes them look complicit. Yeah, I think if you stop to think about it, all the behavior of Brennan and the judge support defense's theory. That's what I hope the takeaway from the jurors is that all this blocking of the questions from coming out that feeds right in So that's the one good thing I'd be thinking about as defense counsel. The jury's got to be so frustrated with all these questions being blocked, and they're thinking, "Yeah, I want to hear that. I want to hear that answer to that question," but because it's blocked so much, it looks like the whole process is corrupt. From the Canton Police Department to the Massachusetts State Police to the prosecutor's office to the judge. That's what's coming out in court by all this unfair, ridiculous way of running this justice system. So there is no justice in that court. Chell, you're saying, is there any question or further explanation whose car the Ford Escape belongs to? It was a Ford Edge, not Escape, as I remember. But it was a Ford small SUV in any event. And that is a huge, huge issue that needs to be covered. And it'll be through Lucky. And it's something that I think is very important that that vehicle should have been traced down and it should have been searched for forensic evidence. Who knows? Maybe that the body of John O'Keefe was laying in the back of the trunk and they brought him over there by the flagpole and then threw him out of the trunk. So maybe there's a bunch of blood in the back of that trunk, but they didn't bother to flesh out the details. Reality check. Do you believe the defense should hammer over 200 phone calls of Jen McCabe in the 3 days in closing, highlighting the fact that she inserted herself in trying to run the narrative? Yeah, you got to hammer home a lot of stuff on Jen McCabe. I'd play the 911 tape for sure. Annie Lavelle, you said you work in the medical field doing X-ray, and when Dr. Wolf said, "Yeah, he's seen many drunk guys slip and fall backwards to that type of injury," I said, "Me too." You're all set. You're also saying that nobody cared to text. What do you think happened to him? Did he get jumped outside? They all knew what happened. John O'Keefe. It's so obvious. There's a man passed out in the snow. Yeah, just a man. Corey, I don't think so. They've already indicated they're just calling one last witness, and that's Welcher. So the prosecution is not going to call Proctor and shock us all. Judge Canoni was appointed. Lily Rose, you're saying every time jurors become engaged with the defense on cross, in your humble opinion, they really get upset when the Commonwealth objects. They want to hear the answer, but judge won't allow it. That's what I think is happening as well. Just think all the sidebars. Judge keeps apologizing for the sidebars, and she creates a lot of them now because she's trying to like hamstring the defense. McRamble on. What if law enforcement corruption and or decisions and influence regarding the Reed case goes too high, too deep to fully expose and handle or remove leaders? What's the limit to what the feds can do or will do, especially political people? Well, I mean, they have a political, I should say, public corruption type division within the FBI, so they could be pursuing anybody as high up as this goes. But I don't think they're going to really find anything directly against the judge, for example, or Morrissey, where they're well, maybe Morrissey. I'll take that back. Morrissey, I think, is doing a lot of moving and shaking to get stuff done. Because think about it, he's been a career politician before he became a district attorney. So that's just sort of his nature of the way things are getting done, is to curry favor with those folks that have connections to all the political players. So yeah, like for example, the Birchmore case, how high up would that have to go? Is it any higher than Morrissey? Don't know, but I mean, you think there could be some kind of RICO type charge against all the folks that are running the racket up there. But we'll have to see. It may take several more years before anything gets flushed out, if it does at all. Kathy's Law, it's amazing how the courts just allow the truth to come in. The jurors then have to render their verdict with all information. Yeah. Archie Blackmore, yeah, you find it hard to believe that the young jury doesn't already know about this case. Typically, the young are all over the social media, but are they following true crime as much? I understand true crime is pretty big for a lot of the younger folks in Europe, and they follow it on TikTok and stuff like that. I know my brother John's posting stuff on TikTok and also on X that's really taken off, especially on X. Stephen Weiss, you're saying the most damning evidence of Jim McKay's Google search, how long to die in the cold? I think that's really damning also, and I think that 227 is an accurate timestamp. West Virginia church outhouse, you're saying I root for the defense until the end because that's the way it should be. I try to decide guilt after all the evidence is in. Yeah, I think the jury has to be rooting for the defense given the mannerisms of the prosecution, lack of credibility, trustworthiness, and the underhanded tactics that are blocking the truth from coming out. The jury's got to pick up on that. So I would say you're right. I think most of the jurors got to be rooting for the defense at this point, even though they're not supposed to. They're so sick of the prosecutor and also the judge. Constance Landers, you're saying, in your opinion, Karen Reed is factually innocent. One confusion you have is where Higgins' Jeep was parked at 34 Fairview. Yeah, that's a question mark. There's something there that's really fishy. Why wasn't that vehicle seen by Nagel, the Jeep out there? So something's fishy about that, and I think they're lying about that because there's something else they're trying to hide. I know some people said that he didn't actually drive the Jeep there. He had another vehicle there, and they drove home to get the Jeep, and then was trying to do the shell game with his vehicles. So I don't know that we'll ever run the ground truth on that, but something's definitely strange about everything involving Higgins and the people in the house. You're asking if I can do a live stream with my wife. You'd love to hear a legal perspective as well. Yeah, I wish you guys could hear it as well. And somewhere down the road, we'll do that, but just not right now based on her line of work and she has the same credentials or very similar credentials as to what one of the ARCCA witnesses has, expert witnesses has. So, but given the nature of her job right now, it's just not feasible or practical. So, but down the road, somewhere down the road, yeah, definitely hope to have that be part of the case for Dr. Leslie to join the team here. Ken Weber, thank you, sir. Keep your money for Karen Reed, though. Should not consider is irrelevant. The jury will do its own thing. We need to pray this jury is smarter than the she was there and he was there. That is true. Pray for justice here, because there's a lot of corruption in that part of the country that's really unfathomable. McRamble on, jury is apparently very young and more ethnically diverse than prior jury. Nan Gallagher, who's an attorney, I believe. Yeah, she's an attorney. I've seen her a few times. Say it's the youngest jury she's ever seen. Some look like teens. I've heard others say that too. Apparently, it's interesting. Yeah, that is very interesting. This is an outlier that I cannot predict how this younger generation looks at this kind of testimony that's rampant with blocking the truth and such corrupt government actors. Yeah, prosecution and judge are blocking the truth. So yeah, they're absolutely afraid of it. People in court, you're asking again, keep your money, folks. But thank you that you're asking if Kieran Reed is acquitted. Do the sidebars become public? They should be. It's part of the transcripts. There is a court reporter there, so those should be public at some point. And mistrial is a potential. I don't think they're going to get a conviction, because I can't believe all 12 people would be fallen for all these antics and truth deceptions by the prosecution. Deborah Chair, you're saying I believe there's a one with a huge sign that reads FBI hired ARCCA. Yeah, they'd have to be outside the buffer zone, probably, otherwise they'd be arrested, right? So I think the more people are told you don't look at the truth, hide the truth, I think the more folks try to do the opposite. I mean, it's just sort of human nature. If you're told, no, don't do this, this is not good for you, and look at teenagers and alcohol. If they're told, no, you can't drink alcohol, you're not old enough, what do they want to do? They want to drink it to excess. Whereas if it's like Europe and it's not a big deal for minors to drink, they don't think it's a big deal at all. So same kind of thing I would say with these kind of folks that are supporting Kieran Reed, when they're basically unconstitutionally deprived their right to be visibly seen, not to disrupt the jury at all, but just to even be seen out there, and the way they're physically manhandled and abused at different times that we've seen, then it's really an unconstitutional zone up there. John Doe, you're absolutely correct. The only one who destroyed evidence was the prosecution and their witnesses. Whiskey Higgins, Brandon must be experiencing buyer's regret by now. I sure think so. If he really thinks that he's got this case locked in. Sandy, you're saying Brandon comes off as super confident, but I think he's making the same mistake the defense made last year. I don't see super confidence at all. I think he's just coming across as like mean and snarky and just full of manipulation and spin tactics. You don't need to do that if you got a rock solid case. You could just sit back and let the case go on autopilot. But no, he's super hyper vigilant for keeping out the truth. So I think he's basically being a hologram of confidence. He's sort of like strutting around like a peacock up there, all show and trying to create an illusion that he's got a case when he really doesn't. Then Bones, you're saying 4 to 6% of people in prison are factually innocent. That's a lot of people. Yes, it is. I don't know what the percentage is. I would say from all the years I've defended people off and on when I was rotating between prosecuting defense jobs, I'd say I never did an actual running statistic count, but I'd say in my head, I'd say like maybe 3 or 4% of the clients I had out of thousands were factually 100% innocent. And then a lot of them, maybe, I don't know, I'm just off the top of my head, maybe 50% were overcharged or some number like that. It's a large number. We're definitely overcharged and was able to whittle down the charges and or go to trial and get an acquittal on. Sideport Ghost, you're saying jurors are young, which means they'll be online automatically because their entire life has been online technically. Asshole. Do I think the will happen in a civil case if she's found not guilty? I don't know. I'm not going to really worry about that. They have a lower burden of proof in the civil court. It's this preponderance of the evidence, which is more like a 51% to 49% standard of proof. Lisa Marie from Southern Cal, you're asking, thank you. You're asking if attorneys generally can tell if witnesses are lying. I don't know. There's attorneys that are out there that I think I think most attorneys should know that, whether they actually do or not. I haven't ever run a poll or talked to folks, but I think generally, if they're good attorneys that can tell if somebody's lying, you should be able to tell if you got credible witnesses on your case or not. Drama must remain on stage. You're saying Brendan was heard on a hot mic saying, "Do you think the jury is buying videos?" I heard it is to many others. Camera had been moved, but the audio still on. Buying videos of what though? That's my question. What do you take that to mean? Buying videos of what? GI, no broken bones after being hit by a car 24 miles an hour. There is some fractured back part of the brain, but that would not make any sense where that would be the car strike. Plus, keep in mind what the doctor said. This Dr. Wolf from Miami, he said that there wasn't a deep depression in there, so it wasn't something like a more blunt, like a sharper object. It'd be something flat like a ground. So that also rules out it being a car. So there's no injuries from a car. Period. Norton, I agree that there should be a rebranding of Apture in the near future. We should see that happen after this debacle with Burgess. Joe Running, you're asking others on Aperture side have under capabilities expert testimony, but Welcher doesn't under his capabilities, yet he's down as an expert for this trial. Thoughts? I mean, I think he's still been called as an expert enough times, so maybe they just don't have good. He didn't want to put that in there for some reason. But I don't know, when they're being constantly bought up and merged with other companies, and this is like I say, a equity firm that owns them and is trying to build up this little empire of similar type businesses. People in court, what is the law on releasing sidebars post-trial? It'd be under Freedom of Information. Every state has some kind of Freedom of Information Act, so that's how it could be posted or obtained by folks who then post it. Feds paid for ARCA, yep. That's a huge thing that's being blocked by this judge and prosecutor. Very, very disturbing thing to see. Extremely disturbing. Yukon Denali, reasonable doubt. So obviously anyone who's not in the canon mafia. Jennifer Rank, do you think the FBI likely knows who is responsible for this crime? I think they have an idea. I think they know Karen Reed is not responsible for it. There's no doubt in my mind they know Karen Reed is not responsible for it. I agree, drama. The judge did cause juror confusion last trial. Yes, Charlie Wyman, the jury instruction will be heavily argued this time, as will the option for partial verdicts. And that takes up about, what, 10 minutes of your time as a defense lawyer? And then you got to have only 50 minutes to argue the rest if they keep it just an hour. It's just an insane amount of limitation. McRamble on, the jury's still very confused about the basic story and timeline, let alone which and why pieces of evidence matter because of the way Brandon presented the case. We'll probably be surprised to see the Commonwealth rest. Everything about the Commonwealth's case is just strange. Any way you look at it, it's strange. The way they don't have witnesses to support their theory. They haven't presented their theory yet, exactly how John O'Keefe got hurt. They're bringing witnesses that create reasonable doubt. I mean, it's just really bizarre. No, we can see your chats. Triple S, can the Person of the Year award be something a value award to Canoni for cooperation in sandbagging Karen Reed? This can that also be proof of conspiracy? I don't think there's any direct correlation. I think it just is really tone deaf for the Bar Association to highlight the judge in the middle of a murder trial, especially when there's a mass public outcry of the injustice going on, the way she's ruling, and totally protecting the prosecution's corruption and incompetence and blocking of the truth. Had to be, yes, that's what I'm saying, is that they should be allowed to ask ARCA who they got hired by in working on this case. Keep in mind, ARCA didn't even know who Karen Reed was until after they got done with their findings. The FBI kept the Karen's name blocked out and any other witness names. They just wanted to know straight information. Jenny 33, will Welcher show his original report? Because that would be different than the data from Burgess and why and how did Berger not work from raw data? Well, I think that Welcher's line of expertise is totally different from Burgess. Welcher's more like Rentschler, where he's going to talk about the biomechanical stuff and the type of injuries you'd expect from being hit by a car and how that none of that aligns with what John O'Keefe had happen to him. He'd talk about maybe broken bones, things of that nature, if the judge allows it, that is. And it should be allowed because that's what his expertise is about. Burgess was handed the information. It could have been corrupted. Keep in mind the evidence was not properly handled, including the digital evidence, much of it, or most of it, I should say. Deborah Clare, yes, I think ARCCA should be asked what types of companies or agencies do they work for. Then they could talk about all kinds of federal agencies to include FBI, NTSB, and FAA, and gone down lines, major professional sports leagues, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, Luan, that's a good point. Court takes almost a week off, but only 1 hour for closing. Yeah, it is unbelievable. All right, just looking through questions here. El Jefe, you're saying, do I believe that the phone temperature history shows that someone tampered with either the phone or John's body as late as 1:07 a.m.? You know, that whole phone temperature thing that they're trying to bring out to show what the body, whether the phone was outside or inside. I think a lot of that is not accurate stuff at all. So I think it's not meant to be that highly scientific that we should rely on it and use it to try to say what the prosecution's reporting it to say. River Birch, yeah, it was so obvious that the judge deliberately stopped any momentum the defense had. Yeah, it's very tough when you got somebody's stonewalling you like the Brennan show, and then a judge is going to rubber stamp most of all of it. Rico, you're saying we bet we lose a juror Tuesday after 5 days off, and then juror communication with a friend on X. I think there's going to be some people kicked off or something like that. Beach bum, you're asking, did I defend? Did I defend what? I don't know what context you're talking about. Social, you saying you agree 100% the jury needs to know the Fed's hard ARCA. It's a major miscarriage of justice if they don't know that. Stephen Weishaupt, when haven't you seen a DA speak with the media about a case with this attention? Well, we've seen DAs speak, but not make those kind of statements that those angry statements of Morrissey. That was really bizarre. Social, you're asking if I ever thought of Tino with Melanie Little for live stream. Yeah, different people are saying I should collaborate with different folks. I just got an invite I saw this morning from one, but I don't know. I just don't. I'm not sure. I know I'm definitely not going to reach out to anybody else. That's for sure. I've gone on Young Jerks before, and I've seen a couple requests now, but I've not agreed to go on. I guess I'd start out on what was it, Survivor. Yeah, sorry. Some of you guys, there's a lot of questions. If you don't put it in, sorry, I'm having trouble talking here. But you don't put the emoji, red question mark emojis, it's harder for me to find them. You kind of know, yeah, they had new floor in the basement. Blood evidence is hard to remove. I hope they have a lot of visual graphics to show the jury, just like the prosecution did in the Charlie Adelson murder case down in Florida a year and a half ago. Yeah, Hank is just run away from the arm injury, isn't he? I'd highlight that. Everything the prosecution has done to hide the ball, I'd be hammering on that. And I'd be arguing he knows the truth that Karen Reed is not guilty. Anja, you're saying, do I think Hank knew that Burgess was a fraud? If so, why would he call him to testify? Well, he needed him to move that timeline, and I think he realized his resume was botched, and that's why he corrected it. He'd been hiding that detail of his resume. But even then, I'm like, I'm just trying to think here now. Do you think when Hank Brennan asked him, when did you get your bachelor's? What would Burgess say? Oh, I'm still working on it. Oh, really? What do you mean you're working on it? How long have you been working on it? Well, I've been working on it for 17 years. Well, really? When's the last course you took? Oh, gee, that was 2019. Oh, really? So what's your resume say? It says you have a bachelor. So why don't you update that, say you're actually working on it? But then how do you say you're currently pursuing it if you haven't done anything since 2019? So you're not currently pursuing it. So you're even lying about the lie. So I mean, this is multiple lies upon multiple lies, blaming it on people that are the staff there, just a confusion. Charlie Wyman, Leslie needs a piece of clothes. If they only have an hour, he needs to do the whole thing. No, they're not going to tag team it. You don't have an hour, that doesn't go. You want to have, if you could have, if you're a prosecutor and you do one doing the main initial argument and then another one doing the rebuttal. I've never seen it tag team before. I know it's done sometimes when they get extra long amount of time to do it. But when you got a short amount of time and you want to have continuity, and I think Alessi has the most credibility, and he can speak to the issues of the technical issues better than anybody because he's been doing the cross examination of it. Yeah, Jenny 33. He has unveiling the truth as far as the technical stuff there. He's the technical subject matter expert for the defense. That's why the defense is letting him come on and help them. And I think it does speak to the desire for Jackson and Yannetti to look for outside talents that was offered up and not say, no, this is ours, we got it, stay away. So lawyers are have different skill sets they bring to the table, and with Yannetti and Jackson not having the technical background, the scientific type background, and letting them put their egos aside and saying, Leslie, we'll give you a major share of this trial. I think it speaks well of them, and I hope they do the same thing when they talk about who's going to do the closing. Shelley, you're from the UK, and you're saying trials there aren't accessible like in the US, but from the many trials you've watched in the US, you've never seen a judge conduct their behavior like you've seen in Canoni, rocking and no eye contact. She's never seen it worse than that, than what we've seen here. Eliza Grogan, it was only an hour, I believe, last time. And I think the judge shortened it up like the day before. She told him, you're not going to get an hour and a half. It's only going to be an hour. Ann Lavelle, the girl in the trial, said the jury loves AJ. I think they like all these defense lawyers. We haven't seen as much from Yannetti, but WAC 1983, 63, you're saying Jackson Hotel is better as a story for younger jurors. Yeah, I mean, people can disagree. That's fine. Uh, Gen X lawyer girl, you're saying Leslie has a great demeanor. Yeah, I think he has the most credibility and he has the scientific, the technical background, and that's what a lot of this defense cross examination is hinging upon. I think Jackson's done an excellent job at destroying the credibility of all these other fact witnesses, not expert witnesses. All the critical lab type folks, which I guess none of those were that critical, but because they didn't have a lot to say, that um, was looking like they're pursuing the truth. They were just giving limited information. They didn't do full DNA testing on everything that they came across, and they're only following the instructions of the investigators anyway. So anyway, I just think it's okay. So you're saying, yeah, unless he gets revved up a little bit too much at times, Jackson Eddie, how many votes? Well, I think that's good that he gets revved up. When your client's getting railroaded, you better have some ability to roar like a lion in the courtroom. So as long as he talks quicker, notice on some cross examination, he's very quick. So I think Alessi, if he knows it's got a short fuse of just an hour. Yeah, well, we don't know. You're saying Jackson's more organized presenting, Anthony. Well, we haven't seen a closing from Alessi, other than you've seen him argue, like when the issue about misleading the court, when the judge was trying to go after Jackson. So anyway, everyone can have a different opinion. I just think that they're not going to go. It's not going to be a huge difference. I'm just saying from the continuity of the technical data that came out, I think it makes most sense for Alessi, but it's not going to make or break the case. Any of the three could argue the case. They're not going to win or lose it based on that. But the world's on fire is saying Jackson has the most interest from jurors' point of view. That was some people sitting in court, and maybe I'm wrong on that. Thank you. And maybe I'm wrong on that. If the jurors have, if they, because I'm not there to see how the jurors react to each other. So if I'm wrong on this, and they really are getting a better, there's a better relatable connection that Jackson has with jurors, then I would say I'd change my mind on that. But not seeing how the jurors respond to all of them, then anyway. Yeah, we can all disagree, but you know what? I think any of the three have credibility and trust with the jurors. Have Jennifer and Karen do the closings. That'd be interesting. Yeah, Cornelia, I agree. Jackson talks faster, so now there's a lot to say. But I've seen unless he talk faster when he has to. So anyway, I'm sure they'll figure it out, and I trust whatever they do is the best for Karen Reed's defense. Lake Lizard, who has authority over the judge? Well, there's superior judges to her being a lower level trial judge. That's true, Norton. This is technically episode 2. Yeah, more seen the judge go way back, says Sophronia. Annie Lavelle, you think the jury needs to see Proctor. You heard some people listening to the former trooper think he's dead. That's a good point. If they say former, it could sound like he's dead. But yeah, they got to call him. I can't see them not calling him. Nacho, Mama, they really didn't investigate the case. That's why there's no extractions done on all the phones. That's true. A lot of them were done by the FBI because Commonwealth dropped the ball. Beach Home, can I do a list of reversible errors? I'm hoping and praying it doesn't come to that. I don't think I want to do that right now because it take a lot of time. Number one, number two, we don't need to worry about reversible error at all if there's an acquittal here, which I'm expecting. Full acquittal across the board. Carl, do you think the defense should post clips of Karen also taken out of context where she says nice things, says Denise Sanders? I think they should do some of that, but for all 44 that I think the prosecution is going to try to introduce, I don't know if they want to get bogged down in that much. Lucas Knight, you're saying the prosecution hauled Dr. Marie Russell over the coals about how she became involved as an expert witness because they wanted to use it against her to have her thrown out. Yeah, so see how it's interesting how Hank talks about the connection of how some experts is relevant, but others it isn't. So that's what the defense should show the hypocrisy of Hank's arguments. If you're saying if can Karen appeal if convicted based on Judge Bev keeping out important evidence and testimony? Absolutely, that's critical. They've been denied a fair trial. Tammy Emerson, I've heard it's better for a jury to pronounce innocent on all charges as opposed to not guilty. Colonel would have grounds for wrongful charges. What do you think judge's instructions will be? I've never seen that in a criminal context where they say innocent on charges. It's not a matter of the jury finding a defendant guilty or innocent. It's not guilty or guilty. So the jury's not there to clear someone's name as innocent. Linda Mon, who can Karen Reed sue? Well, I think she first needs to get an acquittal. So I don't even want to go down that road yet. Just trying to focus on this trial right now. TNS Karen is up against a massive machine of corruption. I hope the jury sees that. I hope so too. Nationally, that's true. Don't forget Higgins said a 6'2" man with brown hair came into the house at the Alberts. No one else has accounted for who that would be. Was that John O'Keefe? He had a hat on, so maybe he didn't know what the color of his hair was. Bonfire 24, you're willing to bet that the judge only allows us 1 hour for closings again. I'm concerned about that too. Because the defense needs 2 hours, and that's going to hamstring the defense more than the prosecution. Alex Persons, of course, the jurors need to know. Game over when they know. This is horrifying. Scranton Straggler, you work in X-rays. Your issue with this is that did he fall on the solid ground or grass or fresh snow? I don't see him getting that gash from the ground. He fell on it. IMO. I agree with you. That would not happen from the grass. With a little amount of snow on there, and you got turf. It's not anything like a hard concrete, frozen ground. C-Star, you're saying the judge's speeches to the jury are cringe like they're in kindergarten. I was thinking the same thing the other day. In fact, it reminded me when I was like in kindergarten and it was like storybook, or I guess it was book reading time, and we'd all have to sit on the floor around the teacher, and it'd be a female teacher with like a dress on or something like that. And I remember being talked to that way at that time, and I remember certain girls would always be anyway. It was really is really reminding me of like kindergarten days. Yeah. So Derry, I don't think she'll take the stand at all. It doesn't need to. If the prosecution hasn't proven their case, smart lawyers never put their client on the stand. If Karen Reed really wants to testify, she didn't testify in the first trial, so why would she testify now? I think the defense done even a better job than they did in the first trial. Reality check, how would you argue for additional closing time? I would just say, Your Honor, you're forcing me to commit malpractice. I'll be ineffective. There's no way I can handle all these issues. And so once you start talking about ineffective to a judge, it starts scaring them more. Maybe not with this judge, but Beachbum, how will the defense handle Welcher on cross? Well, again, it's going to be Alessi, and I think Alessi's going to. They have the report. We've not seen the report, so it's what he's got 140-page PowerPoint. So I have no idea how he's going to make a credible pitch at all. So I think he's just going to pick it apart and show the lack of common sense. But maybe he'll be a witness like we have with Dr. Wolf that the prosecution called from Miami, and we thought he's going to say something that was really damning to the defense's case, and he wound up helping the defense. So maybe Welcher will actually be a witness that helps the defense. Maybe they don't have a lot of questions for him, just like they did with Wolf, because he didn't do any damage. He actually helped the defense. Amy, weaponizing the court in this manner should be a crime in and of itself. Yeah, that's a good way to say it. Weaponizing the legal process. Oh, Leanna, you're saying Hank asked Burgess if he had a phone hacking certificate. He said no, but his CV said he did. Okay, I didn't catch that. Anybody else catch that? Steve Wyco, you're saying you have proof Brian Albert's Ford's Edge moved that night. You want to shoot me an email on that? In fact, let me check my email right now. I've been getting a lot of emails. I've not responded to really any of them, but thank you guys for supporting the work. Stand by here. Yep. Sandy, you're saying if the FBI wanted this investigation and then when they got the results, why haven't they done anything in the response? What's the point of investigation? Well, we don't know that the investigation is totally over yet. All right. So my contention is the investigation is not over and the feds move in slowly, but they build a case methodically over a long period of time before they go in and swoop in and arrest people. Jennifer Rank says that all Dr. Wolf proved is that John O'Keefe could have fallen backwards while drunk. In your experience as a nurse practitioner, patients who fall in that manner typically also sustain hip, low back, and or shoulder / upper back injuries. That's interesting. So the hip, low back, and the shoulder, upper back, maybe because they're also landing on something. Linda Bonstrom, knowing what you know, you've got a firm opinion. But if I was a juror, what the heck have they really showed me? He died from a head wound and everybody else is acting abnormal. Yeah, that's a good summation. Kate, they could keep it simple by listing all the things that investigators didn't do, and they didn't do them because they had decided Karen did all this after talking with one person. It's all reasonable doubt. That's why they need to have it graphics there on display in their arguments to be able to put a lot of details in because you have to speak a lot of details. It's harder to for the jury to capture, and if a lot of the jurors are visual learners like I am, it's going to be that much more critical for them to display it and process that information. Cassidy, Hi, we want your opinion on the blood loss from John's injury. Yeah, where's all that blood at? Again, John was found in a bed of snow. If it was just a dusting of snow when he supposedly was there at 12:30 laying by the flagpole, as the prosecution maintains, there would be no snow. It'd be all melted, and he'd be basically having the snow around his body, not underneath his body. And so where was all that blood? And the ground was so frozen solid, it would prevent any of the blood leaking, and so leaching through the ground. So they could be basically scooped up the ground that had the blood in it and taken photos of that. But we have none of that. This was not treated as a crime scene with any degree of seriousness, especially not a murder scene. Amy Daniels, you're saying you believe John lost all that blood in the basement. It was cleaned up and remodeled. It was never searched. That's why there's no significant blood with his body. A lot of people think that. Queen Olive, Ruth Ann, there's way too many questions for Karen Reed to be found guilty of anything. Hopefully, the jury gets it right this time. Hopefully, they have critical thinking skills on the jury. They're inquisitive, like you all are. You guys are very much on the ball here. Anne Lavelle said Anne Elise went to the trial 30 for Fairview and she was shocked. The yard was very tiny. No way did Albert's not hear anything. Liz M., you're talking about the head injury too. Was it an open wound? I think Carl just said no one testified yet. It was. Well, it was open in the sense there was a crack in the skull and blood was coming out of it. I don't think there was any. I don't think there was any issue of brains coming out of that opening. I don't think it was that big enough of an opening to have the brains coming out of it, but there was absolutely blood coming out and probably some brainal fluid. Hmm. Lucas Knight, in my experience, how much do jurors consider and apply reasonable doubt in their deliberations? Let's see. I would say that I've not had a problem with that because I've only had a handful of trials that I haven't been successful on, and so I would say those ones are probably, gosh, those are so long ago. I'm trying to think. I don't think it ever came out down with reasonable doubt. I think there was, the evidence that was there to convict, and so that was the issue. And so I really think if you got a winnable case and you're not acting like Hank Brennan, I think normally juries, from my experience, do the right thing, and I just don't. I'm not used to this weird jury instruction like they have in Massachusetts. That's really bizarre. Trying to walk people through that, but that's even more of an important reason why whoever does a closing, they need to explain in layman's terms what reasonable doubt means, because the jury instructions there in Massachusetts are a hot mess, as I've covered in our live stream about a month and a half ago, I think it was. They're from like the 1840s. Yeah, whether it's a mistrial or a, an acquittal or a conviction, the sidebars should come out in transcripts through public records, freedom of information type releases. Okay, Catherine Nicholas, you're saying you're in Nan Gallagher was in the courtroom last night. She said the jurors paid most attention to Jackson. Okay. Marie needs a hobby. You're saying that younger jurors are more likely to believe that police corruption is real in this case. I hope so. I hope so. How do they spend that many times and that many hours of the day without being on their phones? I mean, I guess there's a lot of breaks. There's not many hours of the day compared to other trials. That is. Yeah, Constance, you're saying Hank bullies his own witnesses. Yeah, especially on redirect. Beachbum, younger jurors may be less trusting of law enforcement. They can and will lie to their face. But also, are younger folks less concerned about people lying? I know I've done this before in jury selection. I brought up that, like in a, was it Pew or what's the other main research firm that does a lot of political polling? I brought up the fact that 86% of Americans admit to lying on a regular basis. So I would do something like ask them, how do you tell if somebody's lying? Stuff like that. I would ask them on jury selection. Do you feel like you're good at telling if somebody's lying? If somebody says, no, I'm not really good at telling somebody's lying, I know the other side's got a lot of liars, then I would do something to get them booted off the jury. T, you're saying Dr. Wolf helped defense when he said he sees Officer John O'Keefe's head injury all the time when people are drunk and slip and fall. Thank you, Dr. Wolf. Sherry Porsche, you think the jury's rigged? You're worried about that? Nacho Mama, all her lawyers are pro bono. I thought donations were just for experts and expenses. Well, I think experts and the defense attorneys need to help with their living expenses because Jackson's from the LA area and Alessi's from the New York City area. Marie, you're saying Alessi is expanding your vocabulary. You had to look up mendacity. Yeah, mendacity is a word we have in jury instructions in the militaries. So that's how I knew what that word meant. Solidify the corruption is being exposed everywhere. It's hard not knowing what to do about it. Where are the defenders of the Constitution? Well, that's one thing defense lawyers are trying to do here. Defense lawyers generally have a bad rap. They don't have a good reputation because they say, how can you defend the guilty? But there are people that are falsely accused. And if you don't have a good attorney to fight for you, then you could be in hot water. Yeah, Triple S buying the clips that were taken out of context, making them hate her character instead of believing he had anything to prove. Well, think about it. That's even what Brennan said about on redirect examination. What witnesses? What witness? There's a witness that he brought that out. That is things. If you don't have the whole context of something being said, then it can be misleading. He brought that on redirect. What witness was that? And I'm thinking, well, that's exactly what you're doing with these videos. So he's Lucas Knight. You're saying Brenna's saying jury is buying the videos, believing the clips he's feeding them. It's all just to get on this. Don't like Karen and convict her because you don't like her because he doesn't have the evidence. He's trying to get them to be sick and tired of hearing Karen Reed talking and that they just don't like her as a result. But I agree with you, Whiskey Higgins. The jury is wise to the Karen Reed video clip antics. Ordinary, you're asking if the judge can be investigated for how she's handling this case. I sure hope so. Carol M., why isn't the Sinking raising court about John O'Keefe's socks? Where are those socks? Will they have a lot of dog hair on them from that matches Chloe? Because John had a habit of taking his shoes off before he went in any house. Mary Shea, Dr. Wolf has already seen Brennan. If attacked like that again, may he ask Brennan if he really wants to hear who he was working for in the beginning. They'll shut it down, but that would be fierce. Yeah. That would be a great comeback, wouldn't it? Deborah Claret, defense could argue, do you know how Officer John O'Keefe passed? Neither do we, but John O'Keefe was not hit by a vehicle. That's a good way to say it. Deep state thrombosis. Is there a way to find out more about the federal investigation? The defense has been given access to some of their findings, but has anything been made public through filings? Not that I've seen, and federal investigations are very much close hold. They're exempt from Freedom of Information Act requests. For the most part, you really don't get any of the sum and substance of what they investigate. Eve L., do I think that if the attorneys paid attention, I believe that they could take action on the fact that the judge signaled the prosecution to object? She's done a lot of signaling, so I don't know if they're raising that up on the sidebars or not, but Gen X lawyer, yes, if Brendan goes too hard on ARCCA regarding a connection with the defense, there is a real argument he could open the door for informing the jury that DOJ hired ARCCA. Yeah, Because if what Hanks is doing, he's trying to argue that ARCA is sleazy and they were hired by the defense and making it sound like they originally were sought out by the defense, and there's nothing about the federal government involved with hiring ARCA. So yeah, it's very much is he trying to deceive the jury and trick the jury. So that's why it's confusing not to say that they were how they were originally hired, and that the defense is after the trial decided to honor their request for payment for them testifying with two different doctors going all the way up to Boston, and then spending that time and spending overnights and whatnot for them to get reimbursed for that. So that's not they're not coloring their testimony and making up bogus tests just to make more money out of the defense. I mean, that's just so no jury member is going to believe that. Courtney, I do think the Bryans will be back on the stand. Yes, I do. Missile Mensch. They need to call more than just ARCA. Definitely more. I mean, what about the snowplow driver? What about the guy that towed Karen Reed's SUV away? Lisa Burton, when you can go donate to the Karen Reed Attorney Fund. If you just Google donate Karen Reed, they'll show you that where they have over $1 million now donated. I think they're asking for 2 million. They already have 1 million. Al Dente, why is the state's attorney appellate lawyer always there? He's the one that's denied the appeal at the state level from the Karen Reed team. I've never seen that before where the appellate lawyers sit in the courtroom. Maybe because they know there's so much reversible error going on. Heather Davis, do you think they have started work on their closing argument? When do attorneys typically prepare their closing? I think the closing is always considered from the beginning of the case. I think most attorneys have in the back of their mind what their closing arguments will be. I can tell you though that some attorneys write out their whole closing and they're working on it and writing it and revising it as time goes on. They revise it as the trial's going on, and then they have a final recap before they argue, and then they have a written script that they sort of follow or a detailed bullet checklist that they go through. And for me, I'm just too hamstrung by some process like that. I just feel the case in my gut, in my heart, and that's what I argue from. And I sort of just don't need any preparation at all, really. I just maybe have an index card with a couple points that bring right out, and then I just argue it from the heart. Here, though, I think there's so much digital data. I've never seen a case with this so much digital data that you need to have some kind of presentation, some kind of graphics, and really drive all these points home a reasonable doubt. And especially when you just got an hour, you got to really just cram stuff together. Happy birthday to a Leslie. I don't know which Leslie that is, but happy birthday. There's a lot of Leslies on this channel. Oops, got my phone here on the thing. Mother HVAC, how can an attorney afford to do pro bono? Well, I think they have to not be in a financial jam for one. And number two, you got to make sure they have a good case to help them on. And number three, I would say that the one downside if you're doing pro bono is, from my experience, when you not everybody, but you cannot believe how many people don't respect you as an attorney if you don't charge them a high amount of money. In other words, if you give somebody a steep discount, they won't respect you and the work you do as much. Instead of being extra grateful, God, instead of charging me, 25,000 bucks to handle this case, it's a flat fee. You're only going to charge me 8,000 or something like that. They really don't they don't appreciate that, and they actually treat you with less respect than if you charge them the full 25,000. I don't know why that works, but or it works that way, but that's what I found to be the case. Brandy K, hi to Idaho. You just got off a place where people think his back pocket's ripped from flying backwards. So you're talking about John O'Keefe's back pocket. Was this the right pocket? And it didn't look like it was ripped in the first trial. So I don't know if that's because they're holding up differently with their fingers holding the back pocket in place. Don't know. DKC, exactly. Why wouldn't the Commonwealth take advantage of the Fed hire investigators? Because they didn't fit the narrative. They should have dismissed the case as soon as they had that. They should never charge Karen Reed to begin with. But then when they had ARCCA, instead of using common sense, they doubled down on their quest to pursue the persecution of Karen Reed. Gen X lawyer defense should also call Dighton Police Department Sergeant Barrows to testify that when MSP came up to show Karen's SUV, the rear right taillight had a small crack. Yeah, why don't they have photos of this? This is so ridiculous. We're wasting so much time because they didn't do their job. Think how much time this takes the jury members because the prosecution doesn't have photos and proper evidence. Eddie Hall, Buchanan, and Proctor pick up the clothing from the hospital. He placed the clothing on the butcher paper on the floor. The lab located plastic in the bag with the clothing. Do you find this odd? Everything about their evidence collection was absolutely atrocious and odd and not to standard. Soul Souffle, you're saying if I was a juror, general lost the case of Commonwealth evasive liar. I mean, everywhere you turn, there's so many things that would completely dismantle this case for the prosecution. Brittany Martin, defense can elicit during credentials that ARC witness have worked with DOJ, FBI without stating it was on this case. They include work with DOJ, military and trauma. It's not the same, though. Yeah, that helps, but it's not the same to say that that's how they got involved in this case. Francis Capello, no ring footage of Karen Reed hitting John O'Keefe, only ring footage of them dragging John O'Keefe out to the street. That's why we don't see ring footage, in your opinion. Rachel K, yes, even with red plastic off the taillights, they still glow red. Only the reverse light is white. That is true. Leslie B, no evidence. Fact evidence was recorded at the crime lab till March 14th. None of this is to standard. Just delaying the testing. It's just unbelievable. Oh, hey, Christina. It's so frustrating that these prosecutors, law enforcement can gaslight the nation. It's how about the world for that matter? It's just disgusting that they can put citizens on trial and gaslight juries into doubting their own common sense. All right. So I'm going to go just a couple more questions here. Valhalla, if Brian Albert lives out of state, does he have to appear on a subpoena? I think he still lives in Massachusetts. I think he just has land in Maine or a cabin in Maine. I don't think that's going to be an issue. Robin G, do I think the young jury is going to be judgmental towards Karen for drinking? I worked in Philadelphia and they're all about going out drinking more so than anywhere else you've worked and lived. Well, I mean, all the cops were drinking. Everybody that in that house that night was drunk. I mean, look at Higgins and Albert. They were drinking for what is it, 15 hours? So I don't see that happening unless somebody's like a recovered alcoholic, then they could take a high offense at that or been a victim of that. But I think that hopefully those people would have been screened out at jury selection. Clayton John, yeah, you could drive a train through Brendan's story so far. Just a horrible, horrible presentation for the Commonwealth. This trial is so painful to watch. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off, folks. Almost on 3 hours here. I was thinking about doing a live stream tonight, like somewhere around 9 or 10 o'clock. And so we'll see how it goes. Y'all otherwise enjoy your Memorial Day weekend for you Americans. Thanks for supporting Justice Cause. And you can Google Karen Reed's donation site. Very easy to find on Google. So thanks for all your excellent support and professional dialogue here. Appreciate y'all. And maybe I'll see y'all later tonight. Otherwise, I plan to be back tomorrow night and do a recap of, not tomorrow night, Tuesday night, do a recap of the trial. So thanks, y'all. Take care. Have a good one.